Well, since it's 3 o'clock, I will say hello and welcome and thank you for joining us. This is our SERFA webinar number 8, Crowdfunding, Is It For Me? And we are really honored to have two wonderful artists with us this afternoon for conversation. Grant Peoples, he's a singer-songwriter, he's a poet. He just wrapped up a 12-month variety show called Clay Tablets. And we're just really honored that Grant is here, our left neck friend. And Nicholas Edward Williams is here with us today. He's a blues troubadour, a storyteller, and he hosts the music history podcast, American Songcatcher. And we're really glad that you're here too. Nicholas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And so glad that everybody who's come to participate and to listen and to weigh in today has made the time to be with us. We hope that this will be a conversation, a roundtable that will glean some wisdom from Grant and Nicholas, and that we'll all walk away with some new ideas. So if you would like to ask a question or make a comment at any time, Matthew is here. He's monitoring the chat. We can use the chat box below, and so you might want to keep an eye on that. We'll drop in links and information as we have them, and we will certainly welcome your questions and ideas, and we'll work them into the conversation. So without further ado, let's get the conversation going. I have a question to sort of start us off for both of you, Grant and Nicholas, however you want to chime in together. And I'm wondering, in your experience, in your music careers, what role has crowdfunding played in the sustainability and viability of your career?
I guess I'll go first. Crowdfunding has been absolutely huge for the sustenance and for allowing my career to kind of blossom through recording, through merchandise, through acquiring tour vehicles. Maddie, if you want, you can show the pictures now. The first few crowdfunding campaigns that I did, I raised enough money for tour vehicles, which got me the chance to be able to be on the road and not pay for hotels. And you can see there's an evolution there. The small element was the first one, and then I got up to the Sprinter van the second time. And acquiring merchandise is another huge part of it. Obviously, recording albums is a big part of that first step. And then it's expensive to press vinyl. It's expensive to get T-shirts made, and even to have CDs and stickers and all sorts of things. You can go to the next couple if you want there, Mark or Matt. And it's given me a chance to secure a fan base as well. So, for the first 3 crowdfunding campaigns that I did, I ended up getting about 350 people that were committed to my music, and they'd show up at different gigs, and we got to exchange kind of personal stories, and I got to know a lot of these people because a lot of the work is reaching out to people individually. It's not just posting on social media. So there's a lot of levels to the benefits of crowdfunding when it's successful, and I'm lucky that I've gotten to experience most of them at this point.
Grant, what about you?
Oh, I have a question for Nicholas. When you did the van, did you let people know? Did you say, hey, I'm trying to buy a van so I can have a place to sleep and haul all my shit around in, help me buy the van? Or was that just bleed over from another crowdfunding project?
The first one was my project that I was performing under was a moniker called Weatherman, and it was the whole theme was get Weatherman a tour vehicle, and ended up raising about $8,000 to acquire that vehicle, trade in my car, and then have enough capital to kind of outfit it with a platform and more things like a little small kitchen, so that I could actually build a little bit of home on wheels, and then get on the road and be more self-sufficient and not require hotel rooms, not required to go out and buy meals as much. And so yeah, it was communicated with everybody to make sure that they knew that I wasn't just trying to get a bunch of money from them. I really had an intention with it. And then I kept, updating them throughout the process of here's what it looks like now after I got it, and here's what the inside looks like as I was touring in it, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a constant communication.
What did you use as premiums when you were doing the van, as opposed to what you would do as premiums when you were doing like a record?
Premiums meaning?
Did people just say, we love you, Nicholas, here's some money, or were you giving stuff back? Were you giving, the shit you get back for people having joined?
So all 3 of the first crowdfunding campaigns I did were through Kickstarter, and Kickstarter is an incentive-based platform. So it's not a donation. Essentially, people are pre-ordering something from you, whether it's, this is kind of the main clutch of Kickstarter is when you create a crowdfunding campaign, the main selling point for a lot of people is, of course, your story to draw them in, but the incentives that they get is where you kind of separate yourself from other people. And how you actually acquire the money itself is through people pre-ordering on a different tier of, like, let's say the base minimum is you just donating, you just saying, good luck, here's $5, here's $10. And then that goes all the way up to like $50. Here's a t-shirt. You're upselling everything. You're kind of marking it up because everybody's under this impression that they are supporting you. And you are also going to have to not only print these things or acquire this merchandise, buy it yourself, have it designed, that sort of thing. Then you're going to have to ship it to them as well. And they're trying to give you a little bit extra on the side. And that goes all the way up until experiences like a private show, and you're charging them $1,000 for a private show. And I've done that myself a couple times. And then some people go as far as like a full VIP experience where aside from COVID times, we go out to dinner before a show, then you have backstage passes, then you get to hang out with me after the show. We have a special signing, you get all this merchandise that I've signed, and kind of an all-inclusive experience for upwards of $5,000. And I've seen people have a lot of success just with a couple of those. So it kind of varies, but Kickstarter is the main one that I've used because it gives back something. It's not like you're, essentially asking people to just donate to you. You're actually giving them something in return. And it allows you to be held accountable for getting merchandise or getting whatever you're saying you're trying to do with the money. So there's added benefits of that.
Well, that kind of brings up a question that I see Mark in the chat is asking about. What about Indiegogo? What about Gofundme? What about Grant? I know you have done some crowdsourcing with you said conventional and unconventional means. Can you compare and contrast? Can you give sort of a basic overview of some of these platforms and what the differences between them are?
A little bit. I think what I would want to say first is the first time I ever did, and I don't like the word crowdfunding because I don't really play for crowds. I play for very small, unlike Nicholas. I play for, David only said that before he died and after he said, I'm still driving around the country looking for 30 people that get my shit. And I'm still doing that, and so my idea from the beginning and the plan is to go around looking for 30 people that got it. And out of that crowd, maybe there's 1 or 2 there that really get it. And my little career, which I started, I was 15 years older than either one of you are now when I started, has been just collecting those people. And so they're not really crowds and they're not really fans. I came up with this name called the People's Republic when I got started. And I really curated that list. And I've spent a lot of time, and Donna Mavity and I have spent a lot, who's my right-hand man and helps me with pretty much everything I do, have spent a lot of time with that list. And the first time I ever did one was before there was no such thing as Kickstarter. And we said, can we get 100 people to give us $100? That was that was my first stab at it. And we pulled it off. I got out of that collection. This was probably in 2010 or so. And And so that was the first time I ever did it. And then I've done things, and I don't even remember what the premium was. We gave them CDs, and I think it was a CD and a sticker and a something. And since then I've used, I used GoFundMe one time. It was a little more difficult to do GoFundMe. It was, I say difficult, it was a little easier to do it, but I thought it was harder to raise money because you didn't really give anything back. It wasn't a premium. It was just, I'm doing this. Do you want to help? And so I've used those three. And of course, I've done Kickstarter. I did the most successful one I had was when I gave away really nothing other than painting their name on the side of my van. I don't know if Matthew has that there, if he can pull that up, but I had a VW van, and I just put people's names on it, and I had an artist by the name of what is it with me and names today? She did a lot of the artwork, and I just put names up there. It says Mama. My mama gave me, she gave me and the bigger the name, essentially, the more money they gave, which was kind of a terrible way to do it. But people got very excited about it. And I even had people go, I want my name bigger. I'm sending you some more money. And then I'd have to go out there with the goop and take the name off and add one on. But then as I drove to festivals and stuff, people would come up and be able to see their name. And I think we should do that with your van, Nicholas. I'd really like to see that really pretty van of yours.
So yeah, what's great about that is that you utilize a lot of the facets of a successful campaign as it was before it even happened, before Kickstarter was the thing. And it is about developing, an email list, you could say, or a group of people that are dedicated to following you. And, part of the reaching out of people, to people to support your campaign is utilizing all of the different ways that you can reach out to people. So if it's an email list that you get a lot of feedback from, or people that, that's how they get traction of, or that's how they stay up to date with what you're doing, then that's important to make sure that you're pushing out content to them about it. And then same with social media and the way that things work now. And, the biggest way now, I do consulting for crowdfunding campaigns. And the biggest thing that people don't realize is you don't just click, Kickstarter is a 30-day or a 60-day limit. So if you don't raise the money in that amount of time, nobody gets any money. And what people don't realize is that they end up trying to rush everything and essentially set up a campaign, hit the launch button, and they haven't set up a promo campaign. They haven't set up or structured how they're going to, or organized how they're going to promote this. And a huge part of it is individually reaching out to people. And touring, while you're doing it is a great way, because you can do all the social media stuff on the side. You can plan that out and you can kind of schedule it and not have to do it while you're actually touring, which is a great thing. And I highly recommend, any kind of automating your promotions. It makes things way easier. It makes you very clear on what you're doing, setting themes, that sort of thing. And then, as you're touring around, you can kind of pull in new audience members, and they can see you for who you are on stage and decide right then if they want to support you in a different means besides at that concert. So I've done a couple campaigns myself where I was actually touring and doing it at the same time. And it's great because you actually have additional content too of, here's what I'm doing today on tour. This is my lifestyle, especially if it's something that, they're supporting you getting a new record, or they're supporting you to obtain vinyl or t-shirts, whatever it is. A big part of your musicianship is you actually need to promote that and share that with people. That's how they jump on board with you, because then they see who you are as a musician. And the biggest thing that people miss is that they think that you hit the launch button, and in 30 days, without a lot of planning, you'll eventually raise this money by just pushing out the same post every day on Facebook. Hey, support my campaign. Hey, I'm doing this campaign, support me. But it's a lot more work than that. There's a lot of individually reaching out to people, everybody you can think of, acquaintance-wise, that has supported you in some way, gone to a show, whatever, said that you had nice music, figuring out ways to be creative and talking with them, and getting to know what they're, not just saying, hey, support me, but how are you doing? And are you able to support that sort of thing?
One of the things we did with the van was people would, as they would, it was in process, somebody would make a donation or at a certain level, and I would go paint their name on the side of the van. I'd take a picture of it, and I'd post it on their Facebook page. I'm reticent to, post anything right on somebody's page, but if it's their name, and I felt okay doing that, and that created helped create interest. And I agree with you. I think that's the biggest, a good video, I was told a good video is a really important thing that you can share that's not too long, that explains the project.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, marketing once you launch is really critical.
So what's the value then, do you think, of working with a platform that's going to take a portion of what you raise versus just DIYing a campaign?
Well, you can do, essentially you can try to gather enough people to donate monthly through PayPal or whatever. If that was a DIY way you're doing it, or the way that Grant did it, asking 100 people to donate $100 or whatever, and they'll get something back. So they're not donating it, but buying something, pre-ordering something. In my experience, having a sense of urgency is huge. So that's why Kickstarter is more successful than Indiegogo or Gofundme, is because, well, there's a couple of different reasons, but their projects are finite. They have this end date, and and everybody that is on the campaign knows that. And the thing with Indiegogo and Gofundme is that they're endless, and it's a slog to kind of continually promote something for more than a month, in my opinion, and especially for years, which some people do, I know. And I think GoFundMe is great if you're trying to raise money for a cause, if you have some, hospital bills that you need to get covered or whatever. That's a huge resource for that sort of thing. And actually, I'm working right now, I'm consulting with a group that is trying to convert a historic building in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, into an LGBTQ plus art bar and affordable housing. And they're raising $193,000. And they're setting a date, even though it's through GoFundMe, they're sending a date like, we're going to stop campaigning for this after 60 days. And it's their SBA loan that they're getting covered. So there's different mediums that work for different things. But in my opinion, it's better for people that are going to be supporting you, like Grant said, to give something back to them. And the best way to do that is through Kickstarter. They have the highest processing fee. They have 5%, whereas GoFundMe is, I think, 2.5%. And I think Indiegogo is about the same. The advantage you have is that those are secure transfers of finances. So you're not going to run into any issues with people getting their information taken, which you could through, DIY means. If they're sending you an email with their credit card information, or they're sending you a Facebook message, especially with their information. But it's all secure through those bigger platforms. So that's another advantage not to do it DIY.
One of the things I will have to say, as far as the paying goes, you mentioned at the outstart, I just finished up doing this a series over the last month. I did 12 episodes of a kind of a podcast. It was on YouTube. It was a televised cast, and in the process of doing that, we learned a lot about how people can pay. And of course, since I first did one of these, Venmo has become very prominent. PayPal has become kind of ubiquitous for people who buy stuff. And we also discovered this other platform called RSVP that we actually used for selling tickets. Mm-hmm. And so one of the reasons for using Kickstarter was it was a payment platform. It was something, and people were kind of accustomed to it. And, a lot of people who support music, their information is on Kickstarter. And so they were just kind of able to go do it again. But now with PayPal, Venmo, and RSVP, and the fact that I can take credit, if I were to do another one, I might consider trying to do it on my own, mm-hmm. Because it is so easy for people to pay now. I mean, just Venmo, just bam, one of the things I wanted to ask you, Nicholas, one of our biggest complaints about Kickstarter has been somebody goes on Kickstarter and they want to support you and they put in their information and they give their credit card, or they don't give their credit card, or then the thing's over and Kickstarter sends them an email. And the only way they're ever going to get their premium is if they open that damn email.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and so, yeah, and during the course of the thing, they were getting stuff from Kickstarter that was kind of, wasn't really important. And all of a sudden there's an important thing. And a lot of those get deleted. A lot of those people don't fill that out. And then 6 months later, you're playing in Poughkeepsie and they come up and they go, "Hey, I never got my t-shirt." And I'm going, has that ever happened to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what do you do about that?
Well, there's a couple, things that you touched on there. The first thing is, that the payment actually doesn't go through until your campaign is successful. So a lot of people some people get their card changed because they lost it or whatever, they needed to change plans. So I always tell people as soon as they do contribute, like, hey, you're not going to see anything in this, in your bank account until this date, until the end of this campaign. The other part of it too, is I've had to chase people down to get them their rewards.
Right.
And yeah, I totally understand what you're saying of, especially if somebody just clicks unsubscribe to a Kickstarter email, any one of them, they're not going to get your emails through Kickstarter. So as you send out surveys and the surveys are important once you're successful, because you need to understand what people's addresses are. It's a very quick way of saying, you can set it up saying like, the people that got t-shirts, what size do you want? What color do you want? That sort of thing. It organizes things much so that you don't have to individually ask people. All that said, you will have situations like Grant said, where people don't respond to emails. I had a guy, my last campaign I did, I had a guy put in $1,000, that a guy I knew in high school. And I literally sent him like 4 or 5 emails, because you also get their personal emails. So you can reach out to them via emails yourself. I sent a bunch of emails and I finally found him on Facebook. Turns out I'd never answers Facebook messages. And then I finally got a hold of him like 6 months after the campaign had finished. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like, I'm doing really well." But the whole time I was like, don't you want a private concert that you paid for? It's kind of mind boggling.
Yeah.
You will have a lot of people that will support you that don't necessarily need your music, or your, especially if it's like friends from your high school or, family, they do support you. And some people will be hard to track down to actually give them the rewards, which is kind of a hilarious thing. Because if I was going to support something, I would expect something back. Donna
and I concluded one time that the more money somebody gives you, the less interested they are in the premium. And I've had quite a bit of that. Just like they want to be there. They are a true patron. Now that was another question I wanted to ask. I don't know. One thing, Mark had a thing on here. I think it's important, and he said about you can do it yourself, but I think there is a value if you do Kickstarter. His point, Mark's point was, sure, you can do it yourself, but that's your fans. If you do it on Kickstarter, you got a chance of getting some new people in on, on the ship. Have you found that Kickstarter to work for you like that? You get new people become part of your people's republic?
Yes. I actually have it's a short but funny story. The second campaign I did, do you remember the show Salute Your Shorts? Well, it was an old show on, I think, Nickelodeon, about this group that was at camp. And one of the main characters, his name was Nick in the TV show, somehow got a hold of my campaign and supported it. And so I saw his name and I was like, I don't know why his name sounds so familiar. I ended up looking him up, finding his email, talking with him. It was a really weird story, but what he said was that he found it through Kickstarter features based on the genre of your campaign. So if you're doing a music campaign, they have a music page and they put up different campaigns that they're feeling like either are trending right now, or their editors feel like need to be put up there as a side promotion. And you will gain a lot of people, because there are just people that are, have a lot of money that want to invest and help other people go through Kickstarter, and they look for projects to support. And I got lucky in that manner many times. Probably, I would say 5% of the people that that ended up supporting the campaign were not people that I reached out to.
They were newbies.
Newbies
Yeah.
entirely.
Wow.
And so that's, that's getting lucky, of course, getting thrown up on a page that is featuring different projects. But there's also the side thing of asking people that to share it on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever. And that also widens your circle outside of your own personal circle. That widens it to potentially new fans as well. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it too. And it's just a matter of, trying to seek out those ways. And then obviously getting lucky sometimes is another part of it.
So if somebody is here in the webinar right now going, okay, you've talked me into it, I'm ready to do a Kickstarter campaign, what's their timeline like? What's the process of getting, in your experience, from I have an idea, I want to support my project with this crowdfunding campaign, and when it's actually going to start, or how that's going to go?
Like I started, I think it's really important to plan meticulously. And that means don't start a campaign within 2 or 3 months of when you have the idea. Sit down and be very clear on what you're trying to raise money for. Do the research behind how much money you actually need to raise to be realistic. You need to factor in processing fees, paying for the merchandise, paying for people that are going to do the merchandise for you, if that's a part of your thing, paying for the shipping. And you can save money by doing stamps.com and printing off your own labels, which Matt, I think, had a picture earlier up of one of the campaigns that I did. And it's just chock full of shipping labels and different items that I was shipping out, merchandise items. And then getting very clear about your story. And the story, there you go. It is a nightmare waiting to happen, but it's one of the worst parts of the process, but it's also one of the most obviously enlivening, because you're realizing that it's coming to fruition, and you have the money. You already have the money at this point. And then getting very clear on your story, what kind of message you're putting out there about what you're doing, why you're doing it, why do people need to support it, that sort of thing. And then getting very clear on your promotions, your strategy, organizing, what am I going to do this week? And if it's Kickstarter, if you're going to do 30 days, which I highly recommend, not 60 days, the 30 days are much more successful. And your first and your last week will always have more people and more money. So you need to figure out especially what to do in that week 2, week 3, but diversifying the posts, like putting out your personal story, things that you haven't shared before, putting out videos of you performing songs, putting out videos of you in your everyday life, and then packaging that and then executing it. So you could, right now, it's a great time to be doing crowdfunding campaigns because you can automate your social media through sites like later.com, which is, costs, I think, $9.99 a month, but it is so worth it if you don't want to worry about what you're going to post. And trying to develop a following. You can.
What's that called again?
Later.com.
Donna, make a note of this. What the hell is it?
It's what I use for the podcast. And if you look up American Songcatcher on Instagram, you can see that every week the same days, same times I post, and I post about 4 times a week. And I've structured it so that it's diverse. So not every post is it doesn't go along the same lines. It also allowed me to realize that I could post segments. And so if I'm in the mentality of, I really want to set up a bunch of posts about whatever the history of blues artists, then I just put them in a notebook or a notepad or whatever on my computer, and then I can click and paste. And then add hashtags. You can add the first comment, so you can add a bunch of different hashtags doesn't appear in the caption. It is essential at this point if you want to create a following. And I've already, I've grown it to 2,000 people in 6 months, which is with not a lot of ads either, which is great. Just through hashtags. So got a little sidetracked there, but getting very clear on what you're doing, and that's well before you hit the launch button. And then, revving people up right before, getting them kind of interested. A week from now, I'm putting myself out there for this project, blah, blah, blah. Or if it's, a couple days before, you do a 3, 2, 1 sort of thing.
One thing that I would say, and I don't know if it sounds like you've done it too. Pretty much every time I have done a crowd funding project, I can say every time, by the time I hit the launch button, that record was pretty much in the can. I had pretty much made the record. I might be mixing and doing some mastering and stuff like that. And one of the reasons is I have supported projects before. And so part of my pitch is, I need to pay off my credit cards. I need to get a publicist. I need to buy some stamps. I need to get and so the project, so that's kind of the pitch. Help me pay off what of the money I've spent, and to be able to hire some people to help with the rest of it. But during that process, in recording, I've been able to take pictures and photographs and little recordings, and so I can show the record kind of getting made. Those are the kind of things. But what I hear from later.com is that you lay it all out, and you can kind of see, oh, I'm going to do a poem today, this morning, and I'm going to do a video tonight, and then here's a song segment tomorrow. You can really shape up the campaign with this, if that's what I'm hearing. You can see, and then basically you put it all in there, and you hit one button, and then you're done. Is that what is that how that works? And it just
you're done in the sense that you don't have to worry about how you're going to project yourself out there with your different posts. The underground work is the most essential part of it. And that's, spending a lot of time, a lot of hours each day, messaging people on, I use Facebook to message people, because you can see if they've seen your first message. Right. And then, if they haven't answered you after a week, you follow up, say, hey, I'm just wanting to see if you saw my message or not. This is really important to me. If you're not interested, no big deal. I know times are tight, sort of thing. Right. And being understanding of people, and not just like, you don't ignore them if they say no, because you can still reel them in later, and they already are aware of your project, so maybe they'll share it. There's a lot of different things you can do if people say no still. But yeah, that's the underground work is probably the most is one of the most crucial parts of making it successful, and that's a lot of work. So your job isn't done, but at least the social media part you don't have to worry about.
I want to just sort of tangentially acknowledge that there's a lot of good information sites sharing in the chat, and anybody who doesn't know, if you open the chat window, to the right of where you would type your message, there's a little square with 3 dots in it. And at the end of this conversation, you will actually be able to save the chat to your computer, so you don't have to be frantically writing all these things down. Those links will be available to you in a document if you would like to do that. So just thank you for putting all these things in here. And there's some sites that are being dropped: RSVPify, Hootsuite, later.com. Susie says she doesn't see any dots. Well, I tell you what, Susie, I'm going to save the chat at the end of the conversation. So if you would like to reach out to me, I will put my email right here in the chat, and you can always ask me and I'll email it to you.
I don't know if you had a question, but I had something I wanted to throw in. And that is, if you were to ask me if I were like starting my career over, like with the first time I ever played a show, what would I begin doing? My answer would be, I would be getting addresses and phone numbers. Because I think email, we know what percentage, we all have this capability through these platforms we use, know what percentage of our emails are getting opened, and it's not a real high percentage. Right. The emailing becomes like throwing mud against the wall. And I think even as expensive as postcards and stuff are nowadays, that if I was young and strategizing, I would set a goal. The first one, I got to find 100 people that really get it, and 100 people, and I got their phone number, I got their birthday, I got their, I got their damn mailing address. I can send them a postcard, I can whatever, and really try to develop that kind of relationship with 100 people. And then when you hit that, you try to go to 200. And one of the things that I've stumbled on also through doing clay tablets is there's a young woman who ran for office here in Tallahassee, and I kept getting these during the campaign. I kept getting these texts from her. And it would go, hey, Grant, I'm going to be on tonight on some, like, hope you can make it there. And they were kind of personal, and they were text, and they came on my phone, and they were short. They didn't bother me, and I read every damn one of them. And so I called her office and figured out it's a thing called hustle.com. And I took my entire phone, which had like 1,000 and something different phone numbers on it, and I weeded through it, to make sure that I wasn't, got rid of them. I think we got it down to about 600 or 700 phone numbers. And we definitely, by using Hustle, I would send out two their blast texts, and they come for your phone. People answer them. You go to their site, you can answer them on your computer. You don't answer them. I guess you could do it on your phone, but I just went to my computer. And people go, yeah, I'm going to be able to make it, and so, they would ask a question. I could interact with them. And I get about 20 of those every time I've sent the thing out. And I really think hustle.com. Now, it's expensive. It sounds expensive. It's $2,000 downstroke. But they charge you 20 cents a message. And the deal is it's 2,000 downstroke, and you have to use up that $2,000 in a year. And whether or not I ever used it or not, it paid for itself just in the 4 months that we used it doing these. It definitely paid for itself. And it got me people who who don't follow on Facebook, who weren't opening the emails, people who I hadn't talked to in 10 years, but I still had their phone number, and all of a sudden they're getting something from me. And so I would encourage everybody to check out hustle.com. I don't think any musicians are using it. It is a political thing, and they had really good support service. They worked with us. They were very interested in what we were doing because, well, of course, they just made like $10 billion through this year's campaign, but I think they really saw that there might be something there for them. So they spent some time with us and helped us do it. And we ran, gave us some pointers and that kind of thing.
Wow.
Phone numbers.
Mark in the chat is asking about, both of you are clearly very thoughtful, very deliberate, very strategic in your campaigns and in creating goals for the projects that you're working on. And he's just saying, to what extent have you seen campaigns not succeed, maybe because the vision and the steps toward the vision didn't materialize, or because an artist just wasn't ready? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple different ways to look at that. And the first is obviously a finished product will go over much better with people. I have, on the other hand, seen people who are just starting out, who are, like Emily has said, intentional, thoughtful, have presented themselves in a way that seems like they really are taking this seriously. And, a big part of the success of your campaign is, do people believe you? And it's not necessarily about your product, because if you are saying, and you're honest about it, hey, I'm just starting out, but I really want to get myself a professional music video made. I really think that'll help me to, expose myself to a bigger audience. And the way that you present the project is the crucial part, not necessarily the product. It does help, of course, to have a finished product and to be more mature, but it also helps to be realistic with people and not say, like, if you know for sure that your product is not finished, but you're putting it out there as if you know everything, people are not going to probably support that. And I will say, I've seen people succeed in having a not finished product, but presented themselves well. And I've seen people not succeed even with a really nice product, but they just really did not think through their campaign really well, or thoroughly at all. So
Yeah, I mean, I think what you touched on, earlier is about launching before you're ready. You know, I have seen. Yeah, I think the kind of the mistake that people make with this is the same thing they make with making records. I think people make records before they're ready to make records. I made a record, my first record. I wasn't ready for it, and I ended up taking 300 copies of that to the Wakulla County dump, and did. I just took it and put it in the recycle bin. Now, unfortunately, and I still go to radio stations sometime, and I'll go in there. And like they'll be in there, and I'll look. The DJ will have that damn CD sitting out, and I'm going like, "Dude, that is going with me." That is not staying here. I did everything I could to get rid of them, because I'm telling you, there are people out there that if you were to ask them, they're ready. I turned some people off, and of course, and me, I did. I sent it to every damn radio station there was. I just, and it's taken. I'm still trying to make up for that because you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And I think it's really important to an artist to wait until you're ready, one, and two, make sure you've got don't do it. You got to have the shills, you got to have the people, and on a smaller project, it doesn't take that many, but Nicholas, I'm sure you would agree with me, I can make a record right now and say, okay, it's Grant Peoples gospel songs. And there'd be some people going, oh shit, wonder what this is about. But they would still, I know that they would buy in because they're my people and they're kind of in this with me,
Right.
And it takes some work to get to that point. And that's why I said phone numbers, addresses. It's to me, you get them one at a time. You really do. You get them one at a time. And I wouldn't launch anything until you thought that you had a good idea that those people were going to be there for you.
Yeah. And it's something you mentioned there made me think about, this is, when you're doing a successful crowdfunding campaign, you can export the list of people into a CSV and you have an email list to start yourself off with. And your relationship, as Grant pointed out to, from the get-go is important to continue to get them on board with you. And you kind of keep reeling them in. Obviously emails are kind of elusive for a lot of people. And yeah, like Grant said, the open rate is not great, but you have to think about this in a sense that this is a fan base that will continue to grow, but you need to keep them keep in communication with them. And I've seen a lot of musicians, and still today, a lot of musicians who do crowdfunding campaigns and they don't deliver on their rewards. And this is detrimental, absolutely detrimental. They'll take the money. They won't send out the merchandise that they promised, either in time or ever, some of them. And not only have you alienated your ability to reel those people in to shows, but then they share about it. And I saw somebody just last week, actually, there's an amazing YouTube channel called Gems on VHS. And one of the artists that gets featured on there prominently, there's a Facebook group for Gems on VHS. And somebody posted, hey, has anybody gotten the vinyl that he promised people that he would send out last November? And a bunch of people were like, no. And everybody was like kind of crapping on him. Like, okay, he's not a man of his word, essentially. And so it goes far beyond just the campaign itself. And you have to realize that now, you're also a public figure as soon as you do a crowdfunding campaign, if it's successful. So there's a lot of different, it's stepping into a different arena. And like Grant said, if you're not ready for that, you need to consider that before you do it, for sure.
I wanted to say one other thing is that, I had a conversation with Donna about whether I wanted to announce I did not send this out to my email list that we were doing this. And I put it on Facebook kind of at the last minute. And the reason was, and this is what I told Donna, I said, I don't want to make, I all of a sudden got really weird feeling about asking people to come to a panel and hear me talk about how I have gotten money from them. That said, and this is the God's honest truth, because I started when I was 50 years old, it still amazes me that 30 people will show up. Okay. And I am genuinely, honestly, there's like this little woman named Betty Phelps, she's not really on Facebook or anything, and I can play anywhere in Florida and that woman's there, and I am really touched by that. And I really feel a deep hearted obligation to these people who are kind of on board with me. And, and it's genuine, I care about these people. I'm interested in their lives. I'm interested in anybody who would want to hear, who would make that drive to see me, that I can count on. I know that if I'm around, they're there. And if you don't have that, I think people will see it, and cultivate it, cultivate genuinely an interest in your fans and in these people, who they are and who else are they listening to, and what is their work? What do they do? Where do they live? Their dogs, their pets, all of that. I'm genuinely interested in every bit of that. So that's why I don't like the crowd, the whole idea of the crowd funding. That makes it like there's these faceless things out there, and to me, these people really have faces. I can't always remember their names, but I know who they are, and I'm really genuinely grateful to them. And I try to make that. Can I show a couple of the other premiums? Matthew, I don't know if you're there. Can you have those bird houses? And this is something I recommend to somebody too. If you're getting ready to do one of these, go to every Kickstarter campaign you can get to and see the premiums that people are doing, because you can steal their ideas. Now, the birdhouse was an idea from Rod Pikett. I don't know if y'all know Rod or not, but Rod and his dad made birdhouses. And this was a premium. I think it was $150 premium. You got the bird. Me and my friend Frank Lindemood made these birdhouses. We ended up making them, paint them pink later on, because that's kind of a color. And so we had pink birdhouses, and I would write little notes on them to the people and stuff like that. I flat out stole that idea from Rod Pikett, and it's an easy idea. All it takes is a little shop and some plans. I think they cost us, less than $5 to make and another $8 to send. And that was a great idea, and it wasn't mine. And then there's another one, ice picks. I don't know if you can pull that one up. I think I sent you an ice pick. Didn't I send you an ice pick? Maybe I didn't. But we did ice picks, with my name on the ice pick, and which was kind of a loaded gift, about what the hell am I using an ice pick for? But it's a great tool, and I keep one in my car, and you can use them for all kinds of stuff. And that did really well. And so I think finding a good premium, and like I said, just go out there and do a lot of research. Feel if it's worked for somebody else, it can work for you, and spend some time on that.
Anybody that went to SERFA a few years ago, if you remember Ellis Paul, when he went up on stage, he had a fantastic little box that was full of all sorts of different things. That was one of the best premiums I've ever seen, because it was creative, and it also intrigued people, because it's kind of like a box set where you get a mishmash of different things that all relate to the music or the musician. And I know he did extremely well selling those and getting people on board with crowdfunding campaigns through that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, we're talking about, oh, those are so cool, Grant.
That's awesome.
Oh my God. I didn't even quite know what an ice pick looked like when you were describing that. That's very cool.
I was thinking like a pickaxe. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Ice pick, they used to be, everybody had one, because, your ice came on a truck, and you had to bust your ice up and put it in your ice box. So it was
That's cool.
Yeah.
So awesome. I'm wondering, we're talking about all these things, like, you got to meet people, the people who will drive for you, the people who are your 100, and we are living right now in a world where we're not driving, we're not touring there, regardless of the size of your crowd, that crowd can't gather. So how, and there's so much that's online, everybody who's making music, everybody who's got things to share is doing it virtually. How do you get over that audience fatigue? How do you stand out? Can something like Patreon help to cultivate that small group? Can it help make up for some of that? What are you experiencing now and in the last year?
These are great questions. So through COVID and starting the podcast, I started a Patreon, and I was really intimidated by Patreon for years, even though I had many different musical friends that have been using it for years and swear by it, because it seemed like a different animal. And in a lot of ways it is, in that the medium is different. So, I mean, not the medium itself, people are online, but they're monthly subscribers. And essentially these people are paying for a VIP experience in a lot of ways. So you think about your Patreon as a way to draw people into exclusive content that you're giving them. And a lot of it is, most people actually don't interact on Patreon itself. A lot of people that support it, they'll get emails about about you, releasing some new post, whether it's poetry or you have a specific song you wrote for the Patreon group, or a video that you're only showing there and you're throwing teasers everywhere else on social media. But it is extremely hard to do a crowdfunding campaign now if you haven't established an audience already before COVID happened. It's not impossible. And the only way that I see that being viable is by creating really professional content and doing some specific targeted ads to draw some people into you, and then communicating with them. And that's as simple as creating posts that draw questions that intrigue people to answer, and getting some communication back and forth. And then you can kind of start developing a group that will eventually become, crowdfunding supporters. You could do a Patreon if you have a support group now. I would not suggest doing a Kickstarter campaign unless if you're doing something specific, like if you're trying to record a new album, or you're trying to get press for an album that you've already released, or a combination of those things. And obviously don't do it for a tour vehicle or something that relates to touring right now. I don't think that people will jump on board with that necessarily. And yeah, the point, the difference with Patreon and Kickstarter is it's monthly. They don't actually get something physical usually, except there are specific things that you can set up. So with my Patreon, people that donate $30 a month, the third month, they get a t-shirt that's specifically for the group of patrons. So it's specific to that person essentially, or to that group. And they can't, you can't get that t-shirt anywhere else. And you can set things up like that give back to people, but most people, in my experience and what I understand of it and from other campaigns, don't. Now there's also some people that are doing like, you can do this based on whatever you can afford or whatever you can do. Like Grant was talking about postcards earlier, and that's kind of become a new thing that's been brought back. Obviously, like with our mainstream culture, there's another group that is a subculture that is bringing back old ways of doing things. That's why you have musicians, for whatever reason, on their merchandise table, they have cassette tapes, which nobody actually listens to. Those has become trinkets, but it's the idea of bringing back old sounds. I don't know that they'll have the resurgence like vinyl has, but you can do that, and you can bring people in through different mediums, through different offerings, of course. But Patreon is really amazing because it's consistent. It's every month you get a substantial amount based on your supporters, and you can keep growing that. And obviously people kind of drop in and out based on what they can afford. But if you can draw upwards of 50 to 100 people, you can make between $500 and $1,000 a month just off of this content that you're giving them. And with my podcast, I've made it clear to everybody that I have a 6-month-old at home, so I can't create a lot of content right now. This is mainly to support the podcast and the efforts that go behind it. And as long as you're clear about your message, people don't necessarily question it as much. Obviously, you need to be clear in your posts and like continuously thanking them for their support. But Patreon, I know for many musicians right now has been clutch. Unless if you're planning to raise a Kickstarter campaign or a GoFundMe to support like an entire year's worth of touring, I would not suggest doing those right now.
How do you here's the problem I've had, and we've looked at this page. The two problems I've had looking at Patreon from the outside, I might need to hire you to be my consultant, is the first thing is, I know some really good artists out there that sell a lot of records and have a way bigger following than I do. And I go to their Patreon and there's like nothing. I mean, they're posting stuff, but there's no interaction. It doesn't really seem like anything's happening. And I'm going like, geez, I don't want to have to like, wake up and go, oh, I got to create content. And you put the content and 6 people look at it, So I've had that issue. And the other issue is like, okay, let's just say I do Patreon. Say I've got $1,000 a month coming in, and now I want to make a record. Well, like now the people I'm going to help me make a record are the same people that are giving me the money every month for Patreon, and I'm worried about the swords getting crossed there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would not suggest doubling over your crowdfunding and crossing those like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because you're drawing
but they're
from
going
the
to
same
hear
crowd.
about but they're going to hear about it. In other words, you're doing Patreon, and let's just say you don't even announce it on Patreon that you're making a record. You just go by your email list and social media, I'm making a record, and and you got a Kickstarter thing going on over here while you got the Patreon thing going over here. I just worry.
I don't think that's a good idea at all.
Oh, okay. So let's just say you get ready to make a record now. So just say like all of a sudden you go, you get a deal. Some record company comes to you and say, man, we want to take the 12 best songs that you've done on your podcast, and we want to make a record. We want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you decide that you want to do a crowdfunding campaign to pay for your tour to go out and support this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stop doing Patreon at that point? What do? Do you hit the pause button on Patreon before you do that?
No. What I would do is essentially you use that, that post or that content that you're adding content. You're saying, I have a new album that I want to put out, to draw in more patrons. And you can also ask the people that are engaging on Patreon. And honestly, most of the time that you're, like you pointed out, most of the time that you send messages out or you get posts, there's not a lot of interaction between the audience, the people that are supporting you. What they are getting is the satisfaction of supporting you, of course, but they also see the content that you put out on social media more often than they will see it on Patreon. And what I would do is try to get people to double down on their commitment for that month. And that means individually reaching out to each of those people that are supporting you on Patreon, not through Patreon itself, but through, email or through Facebook, or if you know them in person, asking them to step up to double their pledge for this month, because you're trying to raise enough money to record a record. And being realistic about, you probably will have to, take a little bit less than you can, than the record would cost, or whatever it is. Some of it will come out of pocket, and making sure that's clear to everybody else too. Like, I'm putting in some money as well, and being just as realistic as possible. But I would definitely never cross platforms like that. You'll alienate the people that are already supporting you, and probably make them not want to continue, which is very easy to just delete your pledge for the rest of the time. You know what I mean? I would try to entreat people to double down for a month and see if you can raise enough money that way.
So acknowledging that we're at the top of the hour here, make sure that you have a look at the chat for both Grant and Nicholas's websites and their projects. The American Songcatcher there. Grant's got his Clay Tablets project that just wrapped up 12 episodes. And make sure that you're on the SERFA email list and the SERFA Folk Google group if you would like, and engage with us in that way. There's absolutely no reason why Grant and Nicholas, if you have any last minute acknowledgments of any of the questions in the chat or anything else you want to say, please feel free. And this has just been wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks for the folks in the chat for chiming in and keeping a lively discussion. And thank you, Grant. Thank you, Nicholas, for your wisdom. You guys are awesome. This has been really fun.
It's my pleasure. It looks like somebody asked about Gofundme and Indiegogo. So there is a couple, just quickly, some things to consider before doing that over Kickstarter. Number one, those aren't as reputable, even though it sounds like it's a common thing that people would know about it. More people actually know about Kickstarter. So you have that. The other is that you're very limited in what you're able to do in your story. So that you can't change the text, you can't center or align anything. You essentially have to do it yourself or figure out how you can get it to center. And it's just not user friendly in the way that if you want to convey a deep message and add a very aesthetically pleasing story, Kickstarter is great for that. You can do all sorts of different things. So there is that part as well. And then again, like I said earlier, not having a sense of urgency of that this project has a finite timeline does not make those projects successful for music projects. It does make it successful if you're like in dire need, like my daughter has a hospital bill that we can't afford or whatever it is. Something personal. And it's great to cover or recoup costs. And people can, obviously decide to support you based on your story there. But that's really my experience has been more personal, not for musicians, at least as far as campaigns go.
Yeah. Grant says, I learned a lot. Me too.
That's why I came. I came here because I knew I could get an hour with this guy, and because he charges people for this stuff, and I just figured, like, this was my way of like scamming him. And it worked.
You pulled one over on me for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. If anybody, I'll add my email in the chat. If anybody has questions or you're looking for a consultant for a project, you can feel free to email me.
And thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Emily, both of y'all for doing this and inviting me.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you all so much. I am going to hit the end button if
we shall reconvene at SERFA next year.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
We'll be back here next month, third Thursday of the month, 3 p.m. Eastern. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Great to see you guys.